We've got a month to go before we've got Anthony Joshua versus Daniel Dubois, and I'm joined by Joey Knight. How we doing, mate?
I'm good, mate. Good to be back on the channel. How's things?
Good, mate. Yeah, it's been a while. I haven't seen you since we're out in Saudi for the 5 versus 5, so
Yeah.
it's good to get you back on the channel.
Yeah, I'm buzzing
But
about this fight too. It's a fight that's almost carved out of your old gym. When you was in the Team GB set up, these boys sparred a lot of rounds, and it was reported that they had sparred, that Daniel Dubois had travelled up to that gym and sparred AJ up there. So lots of round share between the two. And you know what they usually say, didn't you, about fights where both fighters have sparred each other normally is there's not as much of the feeling out process because they've already got a taste for each other's power, speed, aggressiveness. So I can't see any way that we don't get an exciting fight here.
100%. I mean, when I was actually seeing Daniel Dubois when he was only about 16 down at GB, he come to spar one of my mates, Warren Baster. And I just remember Warren Baster saying, he was like, my mate Warren Baster was about, I think he was about 25 at the time. And he said he had to really put it on this kid who was only 16 years of age. He said he was so powerful, he kind of had to sink a few in just to keep him in his place. And crazy the power he had at 16. It's kind of like a Mike Tyson, the stories he hear when he was only a young man knocking out grown men. I'm kind of more excited for this fight than the Fury versus Usyk fight. I don't know what it is because, originally I wasn't. But as this fight's come round, because it's kind of a fight I wasn't really expecting, and then when it got announced, I don't know, as the times went on and after that face-off that they had, and I seen the real, because Anthony Joshua was the number one when he was on GB, and Dubois was just this young kid coming along. I feel as if Joshua's trying to put him in his place, but Daniel Dubois is not having any of it, and he's looking really, really confident, so I'm just really excited for it.
Yeah, I think Daniel Dubois is very much coming of age now, isn't he? Like, I think early on,
Absolutely.
I'm not going to say shied away from the media obligations and the things like that he had to do, but I don't think it came natural to him. And also, I think early on, we as the boxing public that were watching his fights and watching the build up for his fights, we hadn't really seen any kind of personality from Daniel Dubois. Now, obviously,
No.
you could listen. Daniel Dubois seems like the kind of guy, and we were stayed in the same hotel as him, that you could spend a bit of time around, and you wouldn't really see the personality come through all that much. You do need to probably get to know him on a deeper level, and I feel like this journey he's been on, in which we've seen him against Joe Joyce, we've seen him against Usyk, now Hrgovic, some big heavyweight names. We're now starting to understand a little bit of the personality and the psychology of Daniel Dubois. And I think that the British public are warming to him. And I think that Daniel Dubois himself is feeling that love now from the British public a little bit. Now, he might not be as popular as AJ, and he might not be as recognizable as AJ to the man on the street type thing. But one thing he does have going in his favor in this fight is a lot of the British public are almost rooting for what they see as the underdog in Daniel Dubois. But I'll be interested because I remember me and you had a conversation about this, right? Do you still stick with your old sort of percentage split where because I think originally, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here because I could well be, but I think originally you was saying that you felt like this was kind of an 80-20 in AJ's favour, whereas I was saying I see it as a bit more towards a 50-50 that I might just edge towards AJ in.
It's such a difficult one. I think it's one of them things I'm coming round to a little bit more that, Dubois has a better chance. I still can't see him beating Anthony Joshua. I think Anthony Joshua's just too seasoned because people talking about the comparison to the recent opponents that they've had and saying that Dubois has been fighting at a higher level. But at the same time, Anthony Joshua in general, forgetting them last couple of fights, he's the one who's actually fought as an amateur and a professional at the highest level. And, that experience with the top guys, numerous times AJ's been there and kind of done it. So I'm not really massively just taking into the recent fights into consideration. I know it does play its part in, form is a thing. But both guys have been on good forms despite the fact that, Joshua essentially has been fighting at a slightly lower level. His opponents haven't been as good. But, this is boxing. It's heavyweight boxing. It's so difficult because one punch, it doesn't matter what your form's like, who you've fought in the past. It doesn't make any difference who you've been sparring in the gym. One punch in a fight at heavyweight division, everything changes. So it's just one of those things. It's really hard. I keep on chopping and changing, if I'm honest. But, I'm still sticking by what I originally said. But as the fight's coming nearer, there's definitely things where I'm starting to think, actually, the way I'm seeing Daniel Dubois kind of hold himself in the way he's shown a lot more confidence. And like we've said, the previous fights with Miller and Hrgovic, he is starting to come of age, and I think he's proved a lot of the public that he's proved them wrong basically. And I think he's a lot better and got a lot more confidence, and I think he has got the balls that people say he didn't have. He's come through a hard fight against Miller, and the Hrgovic fight, I didn't see that coming. I mean, I was still giving it a close fight going into the fight, but I certainly didn't think that he would took the punishment that he took in them early rounds, and I certainly didn't think that he was going to be able to stop Hrgovic. I just thought he would be too seasoned. So, like I say, he's kind of made me a believer since them fights, but I am still sticking with I'm still picking Anthony Joshua 80-20. I still think at this point of time he's a little bit too seasoned. And just to mention, just going off that 5 versus 5 when we're over there, and obviously we're seeing Hrgovic and Dubois, there's a new guy kind of in that heavyweight mix, which I just want to just briefly talk about. You were over there in LA with Bacoli, who beat Jared Anderson, which I think was quite a shock, not to me personally, because to be honest, I knew how good Bacoli was, and I actually fought on a show in Newcastle with Bacoli. I seen him up close and personal, and absolute giant of a guy, lovely guy by the way, but when I seen him in the ring and seen what he could do and how relaxed he was, and like I say, we've all heard the sparring stories, and I believed it because, I only met him briefly, but he's not the type of guy that talks rubbish. You can tell he's an honest, straight-up guy, and, he wasn't really boasting when he was saying these things. He's been a guy that's been sidelined, kind of a who needs him guy, so he's been patient, and he just, to me, the way his persona was, I thought, I believe this guy, and like I say, I've seen him, fight, and I always thought that Jared Anderson at this fight was a little bit too soon. He's a young man, he's what, 25 or 20, 24, 25?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is very young for a heavyweight. So I was a little bit surprised he took this.
I picked Bacoli. I said you could
Did
watch back the stream, and we had Wade, who was sort of flying the American flag, and he really was talking up Jared Anderson's chances. And it's no discredit on Jared Anderson at all. This wasn't coming from a place of feeling like Jared Anderson wasn't the real deal or couldn't go on to do bigger and better things. But I said to Wade on the stream, I said, you're underestimating Martin Bacoli, and do you know what? Not only am I picking him, I'm making him a strong favourite in this fight. I think Martin Bacoli is going to end this fight within 6 rounds, because I think for the British public, it's funny because he's almost like an adopted Brit, Martin Bacoli. He's almost like he trains out of Scotland, and obviously fights on UK soil more often than not, apart from the last few outings that have been over in Saudi. But when you look at him, the wins over Tony Yoka, Carlos Takam, the stories about him in the gym, now coming in against a guy in Jared Anderson, I just think that, listen, I'm not a heavyweight, so it's a bit different, but when I was 24, 25 years old, to come in against a seasoned, strong-minded man like that myself, even if I had some athletic skills over him, I would still think that it would be a big ask, and that's why I felt it was going to be a big ask of Jared Anderson. So very much, and this is the beauty of having the Saudis in boxing now, because no one can tell me that we aren't getting fights delivered now that we just weren't getting in the past, right? So now what we're starting to do is we're starting to get answers on the heavyweight division that were, if the Saudis had have never come into boxing, probably not going to have been answered until all was said and done. So there's certain fighters, that their wins can reflect better now. They can look better. For example, a Daniel Dubois, his win over Jarrell Big Baby Miller looks a lot better now that we've just seen Jarrell Big Baby Miller, in my opinion, win a fight against Andy Ruiz, Hrgovic, for example. Hrgovic, as much as people might say, and they might be right to say that Hrgovic got a bit of a robbery decision over Zhilei Zhang, I think that the decision being wrong could be right, but the word robbery would probably be wrong, because that was a close and competitive fight. We look at what Zhilei Zhang's gone on to do, So we're really starting to learn that in the heavyweight division, it's very much about that single night. And that's what brings us beautifully back to this fight between Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois, is that, let's say, for example, to pick a heavyweight dust up off the top of my head, right? Tyson Fury has fought Derek Chisora 3 times over. I believe they could fight 10 times over, and Chisora doesn't win one of those fights. However, when you look at a fight like Anthony Joshua against Daniel Dubois. If these guys fight 10 times over, believe me, it will be a swing each time. It will be one time one man wins, the other time another man wins. And that's why in the heavyweight division, it very much hinders on what happens on the night. Who gets it right on the night, who gets off to a better start, who weathers the storms better, and who gets their tactics a little bit better prepared for it. And when we speak about tactics, I think it was yourself and KG, wasn't it, that had the conversation with Daniel Dubois' trainer?
I was going to touch on that. Yes, Don Charles, we had a good chat over it. It was at breakfast time, and he's very supremely confident in Daniel Dubois. And also, I think you might have also mentioned. I think you might have done a video on it because he used to supposedly train, which I didn't know, Anthony Joshua. So I think again, this is where what you've just mentioned there before. It's about, can you execute on the day? And we both know, being fighters ourselves, no 2 days the same. You can be super confident one day and perform terrible, in the gym. And another day you can, feel terrible and perform great. But Don Charles, he seems to think that he's kind of, because he's worked with AJ and knows him inside and out, which, was to my surprise. He feels like he knows all his weaknesses, and he really feels that where Daniel Dubois is now, and there's a lot more to come, and he believes he's like improving all the time, and he believes that he can get the best out of Daniel Dubois. And I don't know what he's saying that I'm not, but I mean, he really thinks that he can go out there and beat Anthony Joshua, and time will tell. But yeah, this is the crazy thing. Going back to what you said about Turki Alalshikh, I mean, shout out to him, because he's bringing us all the fights that we've all been desperate to see, and we're now, like you say, can see where the heavyweight division's actually at. Because there was a lot of guys, myself, I would have said he was above him and he was below that one, but now we're actually getting the answers, because until people fight, we don't know, because styles make fights, and especially at heavyweight, one punch can absolutely change everything. And it's kind of, it reminds me of the old school boxing, because because with Turki Alalshikh, it's not a case of just putting on the great fights. The undercards are great. There's so many guys getting opportunities, and the fights are coming in thick and fast. I mean, the amount of shows that he's putting on is kind of mind-blowing, because I don't think the boxing public are used to seeing fights this regular and so good. I think it's not just great for the fans, but the fighters are getting the opportunities and are getting paid well, but also they're able to develop in their career, because when you're not able to fight, you can train as much as you want, spar in the gym. There's nothing like actually on fight night. So the fighters are now developing and improving. So, they're getting better. We're getting better fights because of that, because the standard's getting better and better. So I just think boxing overall is just in an absolutely great place. But yeah, also, Martin Bacoli, Billy Nelson had actually said that Anthony Joshua got offered that fight and turned it down. I mean, I've become a believer. He was saying a lot of things that people didn't believe, and it's turned out, after the Jared Anderson fight, he tells a lot of truth, that guy. And I know a guy, Lewis Ritson, he used to actually be trained by Billy Nelson, so actually had a conversation with him recently, and he said, he's a straight up guy, and when he speaks, you should listen, because it's kind of, he's a no bullshit type of guy. He doesn't, talk rubbish. And yeah, it's an interesting one, because I know you can say AJ might have ducked it because it's a tough fight, but it's a case of the right fight at the right time, and it probably just didn't suit AJ, and it probably was a high risk fight with a little reward. But I am so happy that he's kind of back in the mix. But yeah, so also just to mention that Daniel Dubois is now the IBF champion. What's your thoughts on that? Because it doesn't sit too well with me, and I know there's rules in boxing, and quite frankly, because he was the interim champion, that's how it goes. But to me, if you don't actually beat a champion, and, there'll be plenty of people probably in the comments saying, well, there's this guy who become a world champion off being being the interim champion, and he went on and done great things, whatever. But at the end of the day, if I was in that position, I would take that opportunity. If someone's going to give me the world championship belt, happy days, because with that belt, it creates opportunities. Even if you didn't win it legitimately, you're now in a position where you can fight the top opposition. And in fairness to Daniel Dubois, it's a great platform for him. And that's what also brought in the opportunity to fight Anthony Joshua. So these things kind of, even if they don't sit well originally, we've now got a great fight with Daniel Dubois. And I think it does make the fight so much bigger. It's a fact that Anthony Joshua can become a 3-time world champion. It just makes the fight a lot more sellable. If AJ does win and he's now becomes a 3-time world champion, how does that situation sit with you?
Well, I feel like the redeeming factor here that Daniel Dubois definitely has going in his favour over other champions that are sort of elevated into being champions is that he's got a championship level fight in his first defence, right? So, okay, he didn't win the belt per se against Filip Hrgović. However, what I would say is ranking wise, if you were to look at the rankings, and it's a different conversation whether you agree with there being 4 belts, and I think that our friend Turki Alalshikh probably doesn't agree with there being 4 belts, and I think as the future goes on and he signs more boxers and has more boxers boxing under the Riyadh season umbrella, what you'll actually see is the weight that these belts hold become less and less effective over the years. But what I would say is, if we go back to, let's say, for example, the Klitschko era, where there was a undisputed champion and the belts were all within sort of one organization, or every organization under one champion, for example. When the belts became fragmented, if you were to make a fight between a Daniel Dubois and a Filip Hrgović, I would say that's not bad. That's not bad in terms of an interim title match, right? Because I've seen, listen, we're in a golden era of heavyweight boxing now, but I don't even have to go back to the 90s and the 80s. Let's just go back a couple of years, yeah? Interim heavy world title fights, right? What about the one that Charles Martin won his world title in? Was it Gladzic who went down injured with a broken leg or something like that? Neither of them guys should have been boxing for a world title. Let's go on to Bermain Stavern, who Deontay Wilder won his world title off. Do you remember that fight? I'm sure that was Bermain Stavern against, I think, Chris Arreola for the world title, something like that. I might have it wrong, but I think that my memory serves me right about doing research on it. I'm pretty sure that was a vacant world title fight. So when you talk about that fight itself being Daniel Dubois against Filip Hrgović for a vacant world title, I've got no qualms with it, mate. I think that's a higher level fight between two really good contenders. Now, the redeeming factor, as I say, is the fact that now Daniel Dubois goes straight into a fight of Anthony Joshua. If, and it is a big but if Daniel Dubois was to beat Anthony Joshua, I think we would all look at him as a champion. I think we would all look at him and go, do you know what?
100%.
No matter how you won the belt, we now look at you as a champion. Because there's a reason, right? There's a reason why the iconic line from Adam Smith, lift off for AJ, will always be, exactly as I just said, an iconic line. Lift off for AJ. He was already a world champion. He had won the belt off of Charles Martin, right? He had probably defended 2 or 3 times by the point he fought Klitschko, I think twice maybe. I think he had fought Eric Molina, and I think he had maybe fought Dominic Brazil as well, something along those lines. I might not have it in the exact right order, but it was something similar to that. And the reason Adam Smith in that moment said lift off for AJ is because once he beat Klitschko, a real legit guy, that's when I think we as the boxing public recognised him as a world champion rather than someone who had won a title off of someone who shouldn't have held a title in the first place. So that took Anthony Joshua maybe a year after winning it. And again, I can only speak for myself here. Maybe you did recognise him as a world champion at that point. But until he had beat someone who was either a former world champion and still very much a very tough task for him, I wanted to see him in a big fight, defend that belt until I go, right, you're now there. And I think that this fight is the opportunity for Daniel Dubois to do that. So it's come at perfect timing. Now, if Anthony Joshua was to beat Daniel Dubois for the world title, I think that it wouldn't be the best win on his record. It definitely wouldn't. He's beat Klitschko, obviously. But I think it would be up there with the likes of the Povetkin win. I think it would be better than the Pulev win. Obviously, the Dillian White win was when they were both still boxing for British titles. So it would be right up there with one of his better wins. I do think that the way that boxing is now going, though, I just don't think you can recognise anyone in the division as the champion bar Usyk.
Yeah, it's difficult because I can see what you're getting at there, because I think the era that we've come into, like you've said, it doesn't the belts are going to have probably less value over time because the guys are fighting so active. And I think, whenever you fight a certain opponent, at the time, you can only kind of look at it, as we see it. But then later down the line, when, that guy beats another guy and, that guy beats another guy, then you have a better perspective of that, fight, that original fight. And I think, like you've just said there with Anthony Joshua, I think it's a better win for Dubois if he wins. That would make him a legitimate champion because he's now beaten a former world champion, a two-time world champion. AJ's fought some great guys along the way. Another guy who, beat it off, like you said, what's he called, who we just mentioned earlier, the Southpaw, Charles Martin.
Oh, Charles Martin.
Charles Martin, you won it off him, and there was a lot of questions on AJ becoming a world champion. Then is he really legitimate champion? But what he then done after that is when people went, actually, he's now beaten some really good guys. So then it was kind of justified. But I think I'm kind of maybe a little bit biased when it comes to AJ because, I'm a little bit guilty of looking a little bit past this fight because although I am really, don't get me wrong, I'm really excited about this fight. And I'm not really looking at it as he becomes a 3-time world champion again. I'm just looking at it as a great fight, really. Just a fight that I'm really excited about.
But what I'm
all,
isn't it, sorry to interrupt you, but it's the road path to the Usyk Fury winner, isn't it? And
this is what I'm getting at.
That's what you're going to get. Turki Alalshikh has made his plans very clear. He doesn't want interim fights. He doesn't want anyone waiting around. He said in an interview that he thinks that it's best for Anthony Joshua to sit and see what happens in the fight between Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk. And the good thing about that is, in boxing, I don't think it's good to wait round. But if you're going to wait round at the promise of any man, I would say Turki Alalshikh's the best man to give you that promise to wait round for. And if they fight in September, knowing that the fight is going to be in December, at least you can then structure your training camp and your routine in preparation for that. It's not like you're giving a hypothetical scenario of a fight that hasn't been made, but you're saying, look, towards the end of the year, that's going to happen. Then you fight the winner of that. Yeah. The actual blueprint and the footpath is very much there for AJ. So I am of the opinion that AJ comes through this fight, no defenses. You've been active. You've been active enough. You know what I mean? He's one of the most active fighters in the heavyweight division at the moment since his comeback and since his sort of redemption rebuild after the Usyk defeat. Sit, wait for the winner of Fury against Usyk, and go in with either the winner or the loser. And it'd be interesting to know from yourself what you'd rather, because for me personally, if Usyk wins that fight against Fury, and let's say that Fury goes to points with Usyk again, and it's a similar outcome where obviously, look, me and you may differentiate on how we saw the fight. I gave it by 3 points to Usyk in the end. I thought it was by 2 rounds, and one of them was a 10-8 round, so I gave it sort of, I think, by 3 points or 4 points maximum to Usyk. A lot of people gave it more, and I think one judge on the night even gave it a draw, which is mental. I could never see that result. But bearing in mind that despite not being trained under Ben Davison at the time, we have seen 24 rounds of AJ and Usyk now. And I would always have a feeling of disappointment and resentment if the Fury against AJ fight for the British public was to slip through our hands and we never got to see that. Would you rather see him in with Fury, regardless of whether Fury wins or loses against Usyk?
Absolutely, because it's a fight long before Usyk come along at the heavyweight division that myself in the world were really looking forward to. So, regardless on the result, I'm really hoping it still happens. And I can kind of understand if Fury was to lose. And again, it's how he loses. If he was knocked out, he had a good 12-round, one-sided loss. I think, there might be a little bit of a less of an interest, but I personally think there'll still be interest for that fight regardless. I think people have been looking forward to it for too long. And I just think I would expect Usyk to kind of sail off to the sunset if he was to beat Fury for the second time, because I don't think he's really got a lot to prove in the sport of boxing. Me personally, I think he should sail off. But yeah, with regards to AJ and Fury, I think it's a fight that just needs to happen regardless of what happens. And I'm really hoping, even, if AJ was to lose to Daniel Dubois, I don't think it's going to happen, but I would still like to see that fight with Tyson Fury. I think the public would be really robbed if the fight never happened, because I think there's an element of, we're now in an era of, I think it's improving, don't get me wrong, but I think we're in an era as if you lose, it's the end of the world. But it's certainly not in boxing. If you look at the sport of football, for example, I'm not really a football man, but I know you are. Footballers lose matches, and that's not the end of the road. I mean,
no.
It averages out over the season, and that's what happens. And why can't fighters do the same, boxers, you know what I mean? So to me,
Well, we're
regardless
actually
on the
seeing
result,
that now from the Saudis. We're seeing, it's not so much winner stays on, it's performer stays on. So, say for example, we look at Jarrell Big Baby Miller. He's now boxed on 2 Riyadh season cards. Officially, he hasn't won either of those fights. As much as I say that I believe he did do enough to deserve a points victory over Andy Ruiz in that fight, but he gave enough entertainment, excitement in the build-up and in the fight itself during his fight week promotion and fight itself with Daniel Dubois that Turki Alalshikh and the guys over in Saudi thought, you know what, we will definitely have you back on again. And that's the beauty of it, because I feel like fighters are cast to the side a lot of the time after they suffer one loss. And you as a professional boxer will know this better than myself. It's very much a popularity contest at times. And when your stock can dip a little bit, all of a sudden that sort of promoter that was ringing your phone all the time, he might not be ringing your phone as much anymore. He might not even have your number at hand. So what I like about the way that the Riyadh season cards are going now is it doesn't matter if you lose. It matters if you don't perform. If you don't perform, you're not going to get booked again. But if you go out there and you lose in an entertaining fight and you're willing to throw down and lay it all on the line, you will get booked again. You will get more opportunities and you'll get a chance to redeem yourself in big money fights.
100%. And if you were to ask any of the fans, would you like to see a world title fight, but a boring one? Or would you rather see a non-world title fight, but an entertaining one? I'm pretty sure they'll say the entertaining fight, because the boxing fans want to see action. The world title, yes, it adds a little bit of value, a lot of value, should I say. But realistically, from the average fan, it's the excitement they're looking for, not the title that's there. And I think, this is, like you said, what Turki Al-Sheikh's doing. He's bringing it all about performances and all about entertainment. And that's what boxing's about. And, just to wrap this up, because I know you've got training, because I know you've got your up-and-coming fight. So just one last thing. I mean, I do think this fight, though, for AJ is a must-win fight, because I think if Dubois loses, he's a young man. He can come again. But AJ's now at a stage, he's had these rebuilds. He's at a stage in his career. Like, I know I've kind of contradicted myself saying that, win or lose, I would still like to see the Tyson Fury fight. But I think it'll be a lot harder, because when it comes to AJ, I think it's been the mental weakness of recent years. It's not been his talent and his physicality, because we all know great power puncher, great boxer, excellent pedigree, but it's been his confidence. And now that he's, with Ben Davison, his confidence has grown and he's a great place. And I'm just not too sure if he was to lose, if he would have the confidence to get in there and be able to compete with a Tyson Fury. Because we've seen time and time again with Tyson Fury, whether you knock him down or not, the confidence, that fighter's mentality is always going to be there. So I do think it's a must win for AJ regardless. I don't know what's your thoughts on that.
I'm not sure if it's a must win in terms of for the rest of his career. I think that if AJ was to lose this fight, knowing that in the heavyweight division anyone can chin anyone at one point, it's all contextual. It all relies on how the context of the fight was going. Was he having success? Was he was he winning rounds? Had he dropped Dubois by that point and whatnot? And then I think we'd get our answer. But in terms of going on and being what is seen as the world champion, I don't think he's going to be anywhere near a shot at Alexander Usyk if he was to lose this fight. However, it all depends. It depends on really what your incentivizations are. If it's money, then there's always going to be money for Anthony Joshua to fight. But is fighting on an undercard when you've headlined every single one of your last 15 shows or so, is fighting on an undercard possibly beneath you if you're an Anthony Joshua, because that could be the way that, certainly for Riyadh season cards, it could well go. Let's say, for example, if Anthony Joshua was to lose against Daniel Dubois and he was willing to step back into a big fight, a dangerous fight, such as a Martin Bakole, I'm sure that would headline a card. But if he was to lose and he was to lose in a bad way and he had to have a rebuilding process, then it would be a different story. Because what you're finding with the Riyadh season cards, it's sort of, you've got to be thrown back in at the deep end when you lose. That's the one thing they do expect of you. The Saudis, it has been said, look, I don't know, but it has been said that they pay good money to their fighters for their fights. However, they don't pay good money, in my opinion, for bad fights. They don't pay good money for non-competitive fights, and we're seeing that play out at the moment in the media with a lot of cases. So what I would say is it all depends on how he was to lose, if he was to lose. If say, for example, after Daniel Dubois lost against Usyk, he wasn't ready to come back into the sort of fight he was ready to come back into against Jarrell Big Baby Miller, he probably wouldn't be back in the position that he is right now, and he definitely wouldn't be an IBF world champion. So it would depend on whether AJ was willing to come back in and take a gamble. My gut instinct would be that if Anthony Joshua was to lose this fight here, the Dillian White fight still sells a lot of tickets and still puts a lot of bums on seats and draws a lot of the zone subscriptions or pay-per-view buys and things like that. I think that as long as the fights are competitive, then we'll still see it. And I think that, like you say, with Ben Davison, this version of Anthony Joshua is a version of Anthony Joshua that I do think is in a mentally good place. I do think that you couldn't probably be with a better coach than Ben Davison when it comes to strategically analysing your opponents. And I think that for Anthony Joshua, he seems like, I don't know him personally, but he seems like a man who does need that sort of mental guidance there. And I think that Ben will be able to give him it. So again, if I was going to be leaning towards anyone, I'd be leaning towards Anthony Joshua in this fight. But it definitely wouldn't be an 80, that's my maths, that's showing I've been hit too many times in the head. It wouldn't be an 80-20 swing for me. I'd say it's a 60-40 in Anthony Joshua's favour due to the sort of the athleticism that he's got.
It's also interesting, isn't it? Just so exciting. There's so many factors to kind of look at. But yeah, I just can't wait. And like I say, Turki Alalshikh's got the boxing fans spoiled because we've now got all these conversations, and it's so difficult to kind of have the correct answers, but it just generates so much interest and excitement. So yeah, I just can't wait for this fight. But thanks so much, Joey, for joining us again. I do want to get you back in at a later date for the Usyk versus Tyson Fury, because I know you're a Tyson Fury fan, and another great fight to look forward to.
Yeah, we'll definitely get back in soon. I've got this fight on the 14th of September, so things have been really, really hectic at the moment. But we're definitely going to get back in soon. We'll do a bit more for your channel. We'll do a bit to go out off mine, and we'll catch up on all things boxing, mate.
Yeah, you're smashing it, mate. Anyone watching, make sure you go and check out Joey's channel. And also, I'll put it in the description below. And also, he's got an up-and-coming fight, so make sure to tune into that as well. Thank you very much, Joey.
Mate. Top man. Nice one, Loza.
Cheers, mate.